Our next session this morning is going to be a delight. We have with us the director of last night's Hamlet, Chris Coleman, along with the player's dramaturg, Leean Torske, and the actor who played Claudius, Vaughn. You'll be pleased to know Chris Coleman is a signatory to the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition's Declaration of Reasonable Doubt. Chris joined the Denver Center Theater Company as artistic director in November 2017 and has also directed two other Shakespeare works, if I'm right, Much Ado About Nothing and Twelfth Night, as well as a host of other productions. For 18 years, Chris was the artistic director for the Portland Center Stage in Oregon. Leean Torske is the Denver Center Theater's company director of literary programs and last night's dramaturg. Ms. Torske has worked as a literary manager, a publicist, theater artist, and dramaturg for theaters throughout the Chicagoland area and the Midwest. Do I have it right? Claudius, Vaughn, is a veteran actor and has acted previously here in Denver in A Christmas Carol, anyway. Brian has worked for decades at theaters all over the United States, has appeared on Broadway in Beetlejuice, the musical. Previously, Brian was director and actor at the Utah Shakespeare Festival in Cedar City, Utah. Excuse me. And lastly, our very own Don Rubin will serve as today's moderator. Don, as many of you know, is a longtime member of the SOF's Board of Trustees, professor emeritus at Toronto's York University. In addition to his teaching, he has acted in and directed numerous Shakespeare productions. He has published extensively on the Shakespeare authorship question, most recently in 2023 with a 160-page special issue in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. Don?
Thank you, Brent. And just so everybody knows, the introductions have been made. I'm going to say a few introductory words. Then I have a question for each of the guests with us today, and I thank them heartily for being with us. And then I would like to open it up to you to respond to the production, ask questions that you have. So think up some questions now. You have 5 or 10 minutes before I'm going to call on you. I just want to say a few things in the beginning. In recent years, I have had the good fortune to see over a dozen productions of Hamlet. Most of those productions have been directorial impositions on the text. 2 years ago at the Young Vic, my wife Pat and I saw the American actress Cush Jumbo, many of you know who she is, offer up an extremely gender-fluid production of the play, with her Hamlet being both male and female at various points. It was a very good production, very unusual, but an imposition on the text, certainly. Last year at the Stratford Festival in Canada, where I live, we were offered a Hamlet played by another black actress, Amaka Uma, a very good actress, who played the role totally as a man, one who moved as a dancer throughout the play. She essentially danced the part. It was all excessively odd in a kind of dark, spy-filled production. Amaka Uma, her training is as a dancer, was as a dancer, and it came across very clearly in this production. I also want to just mention two other Hamlets that we've seen in recent years, both directed by the Canadian Quebecois director Robert Lepage, a major director on the international scene. The first was several years ago. It was a one-man production of the entire play Hamlet, starring Lepage himself, directed by Lepage, using numerous live cameras and a moving stage. So he was able, through mirrors, to debate with himself, to have a sword fight with himself, and do all sorts of unusual things. It was, I thought, an extraordinary directorial performance. I'm not sure it was Hamlet, but it was an extraordinary piece of direction. And just a few months ago in Toronto, I saw a danced Hamlet, a whole production of Hamlet danced, with occasional texts shown above the stage, also directed by Robert Lepage. This production is now on a world tour. It's playing all over Europe. The texts were really interesting because they changed. It was like receiving a text on your phone, and the text changed. So you had the word, for instance, sword, and then slowly sword changed to words. The S moved around, and sword became words. It was very interesting what was done. It was not quite Hamlet. It was Hamlet, not quite Hamlet, but it's very typical of the productions that I've been seeing of Hamlet all over the world in the last several years. So I must say I was hugely surprised to see such a clear and straight reading of the play at the theater last night, and I thank you for that. It really is almost the exception rather than the rule these days. So bravo to you for staging Shakespeare's Hamlet rather than some directorial vision of the play. And true, congratulations for that. So my first question is for Brian, whose wonderful portrait of Claudius, in the play, I think everyone really appreciated. You've done a lot of Shakespeare. You've directed the Utah Shakespeare Festival. So my question to you is, are straight, clear readings of Shakespeare plays typical in your experience of dealing with Shakespeare, dealing with the bard? In the Midwest, in the U.S., we talk a little bit, if you would, about your experiences with Shakespeare.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very glad to be here. As far as typical, I don't think it's very typical, actually, to see them straight portrayed currently. I think more often than not, people are re-examining the plays to find re-examinations of them, setting them in different time period, different conceptual ideas around them. However, like you, I feel very fulfilled when I do see one that is not conceptually over the play, because I think the plays do still resonate. I think they have meaning. I think they have purpose. And I think a lot of times without that construct on top of it, you're able to get a closer relation to what might be happening dramaturgically or dramatically within the concept of the play. Not to say I don't think it's worth exploring them, because I do think it's worth exploring them. I just think it's now not as typical to see them kind of in their normal format. I think a lot also because there's some distance away from them sometimes, that people want to see them a little bit more immediate and a little bit more how the plays relate to us now. So we'll often see them in a contemporary setting or an anachronistic sort of idea around the play. Which is, I think, great. I think that's one of the reasons why we keep doing them. I think is that they have varying levels of content and understanding, and I think one of the brilliant things about Hamlet is that Hamlet molds to the person that's playing the role. It really does become synonymous with whoever is saying that part, whether they're gender fluid, male, female. it comes from the individual. They're the ones going on the journey through the course of the play. I think that's why people come back to the play so many times, is that there's this pursuit of truth and conscience and understanding and being, which I think is at the forefront of everything in the play, the sense of living in the now, in the moment. And I think Shakespeare has done that better in this examination of this particular thing, more so than any other play. Personally, I feel that way. As far as that thematic theme, the idea of living in the moment, not thinking 3 steps ahead of you, not thinking what has just happened, but being present to what is happening as it's unfolding, I think is like being an actor, like being in the theater. And I think this play does that extremely well. And I think it does fold to the individual. Every actor that I know has ever played the part has said it was a life-changing experience for them because they gave so much of themselves inside it. And every production, every performance was a pursuit to try to be better than the last. And sometimes you were 100% and sometimes you were 30%. And that to me is a sign of a remarkable play. And so I love that they're performed. I love to see them different ways. But as far as being a typical, I don't think so. Currently, that's my opinion.
Thank you for a wonderful answer. When Hamlet is chosen by a director is going to do their version of the play. Because if you do the whole play, it would run close to 5 hours. That's my guess, about 5 hours. So you never see Hamlet. What you see is someone's version of Hamlet. Now, if you're the literary manager of a theater that's doing a Shakespeare production like Leean, and a director comes to you and says, we're going to do Hamlet, what is your job within that? And as a follow-up question there, I saw in the program not only your name as the dramaturg, but I saw somebody called psychodramaturg. What is that? And can you talk a little bit about all that stuff?
Sure. It's a little bit different, my role as the director of literary programs and then the dramaturg on a production. Managing the literary department for the theaters is what my job title is for, and then on with a production like Hamlet, where I'm given the opportunity to also be the dramaturg, I'm providing research that gives context for the world of the play that they're building. So if there is a concept that is placed on the production, some of that research is going to be about that. But in this case, we went with more of a purist production of Hamlet. So I was providing research that would be helpful for the creative team for the production that we were doing specifically. And it is a bit different than scholarly research that you do, that everyone in this room probably does. And I have a couple degrees in English as well as in theater and playwriting. And the sort of theoretical conversations and scholarly exploration that this room does may not necessarily be as helpful for a creative team. And so it's a different type of research, because we can't be thinking about an Earl in England when you're on stage, being like, I just killed my brother, I married his wife, and I might do off with my nephew. And so it's providing the type of research that helps the actors and the directors understand the world that the characters are in and support the storytelling.
Were you involved in the cutting or changing of the text, deciding?
That was mostly Chris. Sometimes the dramaturg can be involved in that, and you might talk about the storytelling if I had any objections to any of the choices that the director made, or I might start a conversation about it or ask questions. That happens more frequently when you're a dramaturg and you're working on a new play and you're helping develop the play. You're asking a lot of questions of the playwright to help the playwright write the play that they're trying to write.
And how about psychodramaturgy?
This is a new experience for me here at the DCPA. This is my second production working with Chris as a dramaturg. So I'm more of a traditional dramaturg. He also works with a wonderful woman named Barbara Holt, who is a psychodramaturg. She's a Jungian psychology, and she brings her professional perspective as a Jungian psychologist to the world of dramaturgy. And the first time that I worked with them was last season, and I didn't quite know how our styles and approaches of dramaturgy would come together, but it does very beautifully. I tend to think of what I bring as the what of the play, and what she brings is the why. And so she's helping the actors in particular and the director understand the psychology of the characters.
Interesting. I haven't heard of that position before. Let me turn to you, Chris, and just ask you the most obvious question. Why Hamlet? Why did you want to do Hamlet? Can you talk about what went into your work on the play, what you were thinking in terms of your production? And then I must ask you if you would comment on something that was in the program. You're a signatory to the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt about the author. And I look in the program, and it says, William Shakespeare was born in late April 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, etc., etc. Shame on you, Chris.
So now you know why Kamala Harris doesn't do live interviews. And the answer, I'll start with the program answer. The honest answer to that is I was busy directing the production and probably did not read that. So shame on me indeed, because I do have lots of reasonable doubts. Hamlet, why Hamlet and why this particular approach? I was walking out of my office one day, I don't know, last spring, and I had a copy of Julius Caesar with me, and Quentin, who leads our security team, stopped me and he said, why do you have that with you? And Quentin has an MFA in acting, so he's not only in charge of our security, but he has a love for our field. And I said, I'm thinking about it for next year. I haven't done it before. And he said, I'd be curious to see that. But you know what I'd really love to see you do? I'd love to see your take on Hamlet. And this is a very dangerous thing to say to an artistic director because then it lodges itself in your imagination and you can't get rid of it. And I've shared with our audience, I had the great honor of playing Hamlet twice when I was a young man. And I had not had an inclination to direct it because both of those productions were very different and very satisfying. And I hadn't thought, well, what could I bring to it? And so I thought, well, I'm just going to go back and read it. And what's really fascinating when you're reading it with a director's eye is like there's a lot of things that happen in Hamlet that Hamlet doesn't say. He's not on stage for. So I'm like, gosh, I don't know that I ever even paid attention to that scene between Claudius and Laertes when they're plotting about how to off Hamlet. I was off stage taking a drink of water. So it was really fascinating to read with a new eye. And what popped into my head and was interesting hearing, the end of Earl's comments is how political the play is. It's just intensely political, and the tension between the personal and the political is really vivid for me. And so then as I was kind of getting my arms around it, and I always try to do all of my homework in the actual text before I start hearing what other people have said about it. An actor that I really love working with in Denver said, "Have you ever read Isaac Asimov's Guide to Shakespeare?" And I said, "No." He said, his reading of the plays, you can take or leave, but his the way he lifts up the political and social and historical context of what the play might have come out of is quite interesting. So I picked it up and read this and was fascinated to learn that this guy Saxus Grammaticus had been the one who wrote down the Norse legends for the first time in about 1200 AD, and he was capturing a world that had been at its height around 950 AD, the height of Viking power. And I'm like, and the first version that's named Hamlet, or a version of Hamlet kind of comes out of that period. And I thought, well, isn't that an interesting notion? And I thought, well, I don't want to set it at 950, but what if it was in an imagined 1200 AD, where you still got very deep vestigial pieces of the Viking culture present, but it is Europeanizing, it is Christianizing. So those two things are in tension. Because what I found as I read it was it's a dangerous world, it is a brutal world, and it's a highly politicized world. And what would a context be that would allow us to create that? And it's very funny, your question to Brian about straightforward, not straightforward, because I've done many productions of Shakespeare, and I think when I started out, I was always looking for the frame or the entry point. I did a Twelfth Night that was set in Paris and between the wars, and I did a Much Ado that was set right after World War II in Texas, and they were both really successful. But after a while, I started to think, you know what would be really radical? Is to like do it in its period. Because I had seen so many productions that were very conceptual. You know, I think I saw Titus Andronicus, and was it Titus? It's one of the later plays in Ashland that was set in the Gulf War, and it was really intriguing to me for 10 minutes. And then my history brain just hits all these speed bumps. And so I was like, is there a way to create a world, whatever that is, that feels of a piece, and where the audience has the opportunity to enter it and take the ride? And also for me, it's maybe radical to think, if you actually invite the actors to inhabit the truth of the situation and invest in really clear language, that the play holds up on its own. It doesn't need my help. Now, as I've said to my audience, I reserve the right to change that in the next Shakespeare production that I do, but for now, that feels really satisfying.
Thank you so much, Chris. Can we open it up right away for questions? And let me steal one of these mics. Question over there. I think Ren has a question. One second. And then we'll come to you.
Thank you, Don. And congratulations to all of you. I mean, it was a wonderful production. I have a question that has to do with the truth, and it is Claudius and Gertrude's relationship. I thought you were both very strong in terms of showing a loving, trusting relationship. But there's always that mystery. How much did Gertrude know? The ghost tells Hamlet, don't mess with your mother. But Gertrude herself says, you've pierced me, and I'm guilty. What do you think? How did you play the man who loves this woman? Did you believe that she knew? Had you told her? What was the truth you felt about their relationship?
It's a great question. It sort of was definitely the entry point for me when I found out that I was playing the part was, okay, what is the motivation and what is the relationship with Gertrude? How much does Gertrude know? Rebecca Watson, who plays Gertrude, is fabulous. She's a great scene partner and a great person, great friend now. She had the same questions, you know, how much do we know? And a lot of it came from Chris, our dialogue, and also just the play itself, what the play is telling you. I think for me, I latched onto the idea that he is deeply in love. There are lines in the play that he says, she is so conjunctive to my soul that as a star moves not but in his sphere, I could not but by her. He says that to Laertes in a scene where he's manipulating Laertes. How much of that is truth? I believe that is a motivation in Claudius that is an honest motivation. He was in love with this woman, so much so that he, you know, offed his brother in the process to be with her and to, I think, his own ambition, as he says. In the prayer scene, I believe those moments that happen in Shakespeare when you see an isolated individual in contemplative thought is a moment of truth for that person. Because they're no longer talking to anybody else. And there are little asides that Shakespeare has given us with Claudius. One of them we cut, which was, oh, how too true a lass she speaks. That was one, because we kind of get that later. But in that moment where he's praying, or attempting to pray, attempting to seek redemption for what he's done, he has said, how can I pray when I still own the things that I went out of my way to get, my ambition, my queen, the crown and my queen. So I felt it was basically kind of a love affair that they had built previous to, his killing his brother. And then that came from my own secrets. How much do I reveal of them? I don't know. But I do think he was in love with her, deeply in love with her. I don't think Gertrude knew that he killed his brother. I personally don't think that, because in the closet scene, Hamlet says, I as kill a king, and she says, as kill a king, and he says, lady, 'twas my word. I think that's a revelation for Gertrude in that moment, that she didn't think Claudius would have went so far as to kill the king. And then from then on, in that point in the play, there kind of becomes a rift between the two of them that they no longer become kind of as endearing together or close together. And Claudius gets a little bit manipulative, I believe, and a little bit aggressive with her, that because his own paranoia for what he has done is taking over him about Hamlet finding out the truth about what he did. And I believe he kind of starts to spiral personally, that like Macbeth or some of these other characters that have gone out of their way to murder someone, and then they attempt to have a conscience, and then they kind of go, no, I have to go the whole hog. I can't go. I've done this, and you got to go all the distance. That's what I think characterizes Claudius then as a villainous character, is that he doesn't repent. He doesn't say he did what he did. He goes the whole hog. And we see what happens by the end of the play and the carnage that begins to take place. And I think it's ironic and wonderful that she takes the cup, and that was another thing Rebecca and I talked about, is does she know by drinking the poison that is she doing this to herself? I'll let Rebecca say that. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what she's taking in that moment, but that's something also I know other productions they've explored with Gertrude, knowing full well she's drinking the poisoned cup to off herself, or it being an accident. You can take that for what it is, and I'm not exactly sure what Rebecca's playing, and I don't need to know, actually, because the reality is she drinks the poison that dies. So,
Chris, as director, if an actor is going in a direction that you're not comfortable with, what do you do? I mean, do you agree totally with what
I say
Brian said?
don't do that. No. The phrase that my stage management team has made me aware of that I often say in rehearsals, I'll watch that. Or I'd watch that when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, what if Gertrude doesn't know blah 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 blah?" Well, show it to me. Let me see how it manifests physically and in the scene, and then I'll respond to it. And much of the time, I have the great luxury of having incredible actors to work with. So much of the time, what they bring is like, "Oh, that's something I would never have considered," and it totally lines up. And then occasionally, you have to say, "No, that doesn't help you get from here to here." Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, the question that I'm really excited to be able to ask the panel is the look of the production. It was very gray, very dark, there's very little color, and it seemed to permeate all the way into the seats and into the outside of the building. And I wondered, and with the long hair and dark hair, mostly dark hair, what were your choices in making it such a gloomy, well, I won't say gloomy, just say solidly gray and muted production?
I think, with the design team, we talked about we're going to make up our own world, but we're going to be inspired by 1200 AD in Denmark, when there was a Danish Empire and the Viking world was still present. And we worked with an incredible young designer who grew up in Tokyo, Chika Shimizu, and so I talked about the danger of the world. I said everybody in the world should look like they could, in the costuming, should be able to go into battle in half an hour. Women, men, doesn't matter status. And that it wants to flow, it wants to never stop. There's probably not much automation. And these are some of the things I know about how it moves physically. And then Chika brought in, actually, to our design conference, 3 different iterations of how we might approach that all felt monumental, and they all felt Greek. It was interesting to hear you talk about the kind of Greek qualities of this play, and so she presented this something very close to this version, and she chose the color palette. I would never have thought to choose it, but I loved it. And so that it feels rainy and damp and messy, but those costumes, which feel very vivid, pop out of the world. Yeah, that was some of the thinking.
Thank you.
Amazingly well-paced, even at over 3 hours. My question is, what is your favorite movie, Hamlet, for all 3 of you, and why?
I don't like the movies of Hamlet very much. I started the Brownell movie, and for me, Hamlet is a young man's story. The text says he's 30, and traditionally he's played older than that because it's a really, really hard part, and it's a great part, so the people who are stars want to play it. For me, it's a journey about a young man who is thrust into a political situation he is not prepared to navigate, and spends the play trying to figure that out. So I watched the Olivier version a million years ago, but it's very old-fashioned. So I don't have a favorite one. I know several people who watched the Mel Gibson one before they came because they wanted to, get the story back in their head. But do y'all have a favorite?
The Lion King.
Oh.
I find them interesting, and I also watch a lot of clips on YouTube of various stage performances. And I'm not sure that I have a favorite, but I do find choices interesting.
This woman is going to kill us if she doesn't.
Well,
I would agree. It's interesting that you say The Lion King, too, because I remember telling my daughters I was doing, and they were like, oh, you're playing Scar. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what it is. And I kind of feel the same way. I think each of them have different aspects of the play that I like, but I agree with Chris that it's meant for the theater. It's sort of, I love seeing different people play it. It always resonates new, and it's hard to latch onto one film cinematic version of it for me. Because of that, my brain goes in all these different places.
one more question here, and then we'll move to that side of the room.
As far as films are concerned, I would recommend the 1980 BBC production with Derek Jacobi and Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, that's
it's
good.
done in the most classical style and beautifully done.
Yeah.
But, Claire Bloom, yes. Very compelling, and it's free on Amazon Prime without ads. What I want to ask about is costuming a little bit. I noticed the transition in the crown that you were wearing. In the end of the play, it was like an animal horn crown. Very different, I thought, from what you were wearing earlier in the play. You looked more like an association with some kind of the animal when you was coming forward, the one who would take bolder and more dangerous and unpredictable action. And then I also noted that Ophelia had the crownet of weeds, which I didn't ever see in a previous production. And the reason I'm particularly interested in that one is that if you think that the 1589 Hamlet was originally written possibly by the Earl of Oxford, his wife died in 1588. She was a countess, and the countess's crowns were called coronets. But a crownet is an abbreviation of a coronet. So I see that crownet of weeds as the author, if he's Oxford, tipping his hat toward the bereaved wife, who passed away just the previous year. So I was delighted to see that the production included that part, but I also wanted to say that Ophelia's emotional development and progress through the course of the play touched me the deepest in any of the characters. Her pathos in the end was so compelling, and her innocence so beautiful. I thought, she's the one that I want to cry for at the end of the story.
I will give the props to the costumer on that, because I didn't come up with either of those, but I think it came out of inspiration from her research in the Viking world and what a crown looked like. Somebody back there wants to say a question. I think he wants to. Getting some competition for the microphone. The Ophelia, when we talked about the psychodramaturg, Barbara, who is a Jungian psychotherapist, Barbara has sat in rehearsals for 26 of my productions. And so with somebody like the actress playing Ophelia, she talked about when someone experiences a psychotic break, what some of the causes might be and what their internal experience might be like. So it provided that actress the beginning of a menu of things that she might start to imagine.
If you have a question, do raise your hand.
Sean is eager. Sean, can I come back to you in just a minute? Okay.
Just over here, yeah.
A team helping me out here, thank you. So, sorry about my voice. I have allergies. I wanted to commend you for young Hamlet. And I was going to ask you why. You answered that, so I'll amend the question to drill down deeper. Why did you really see this character as young, youthful, inexperienced? Because others don't. They see him as mature and worldly and I just love that you played him the right way.
It's so interesting when I reread the play for the first time, how the politics popped out at me in a really vivid way. And what is so interesting, if you compare Hamlet's actions to some of the other characters, highly political characters that Shakespeare introduces us to, whether that is Macbeth or whether it's Richard III, you could Henry V. If they had started the play learning that their throne had been stolen and their father killed, their first speech would have been about the crown, would have been about the throne. It's not. It's about, I want to die, and my mother married within 2 months of my father's death. It is about the personal betrayal. He does not speak about the throne until Act 5, Scene 2. It was just so interesting to me. So who is that? Who is that guy? He is the heir to the throne, and he is psychologically, he's an artist. He's a poet. He's
a philosophy student.
He's a philosophy student. He is somebody who spends 5 acts growing into what leadership actually looks like on this level. And so to me, then I just backed up from that. Then who does that need to be so that we want to invest in it?
Yeah, to me, this play has always been about students, and Hamlet is the philosophy student. He brings other students around with him, and at the end of the play, the philosophy student loses, and strong arm wins. Fortinbras, strong arm. He wins over all the philosophy students. I think there's something in that.
But he, at the same time, Hamlet also, as you said about the pursuit of becoming a leader in this, you see a very deft leader give a command at the very end, even on his dying wish. He's like, he has my dying voice, to give that to Fortinbras. Understanding Fortinbras's journey also as another avenging son, basically. But that act that he, even in his final moment, he has an act that is kingly and a declaration of leadership, even on his deathbed, which I find beautiful in the sense that he gives that to Fortinbras, even though you're right.
Even though Fortinbras and the troops are marching into the palace,
yes.
Fortinbras is there taking control.
Yeah.
Hamlet looks up dying and says, he has my voice.
Yeah.
The philosophy student loses again. I mean, that's my personal read. We have some more questions.
I wish there was time to ask all 3 of you more questions. Even Don, being from Toronto, if you saw the Keanu Reeves version of Hamlet, I'd love to know the De Verean aspect of that. But to get to my question for Chris, I'm interested in your approach from a director's standpoint, particularly more from a technical aspect. I appreciated the costumes, hair and makeup. It was amazing. Your staging using perspective for the actors. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your rehearsal process, even casting. Again, kind of nuts and bolts technical, if you approached rehearsals differently for this show than for other plays you've directed, and what scenes you maybe started with for rehearsal. And then lastly, about the humor, whether that is something that's come through organically, if it was just last night's show that we saw where there was so much laughter, especially in the first half. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start with the humor because it's funny. Barbara, the psychologist that I mentioned, she about, 10 days into rehearsal, she goes, I just I'm so excited about the level of humor that you're mining in the play. I'm like, seems to me it's already in there. It's just the way that I read the play. It's the way Ty, who plays Hamlet, smells the play. He feels like it's the way it's built. You know, when he's got that wonderful scene when Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are chasing him after he's killed Polonius, and he's like, he goes to the king and he says, to make progress through the guts of a beggar, we all end up as maggots, and we, the fat king and the lean beggar are but variable dishes, 2 dishes but to 1 table, that's the end. I mean, it's like, that's not funny, that's not supposed to be funny. It feels like a lot of his snarkiness and smartassedness is built in. And once you smell that, like I have always struggled with his very first line, you know, a little more than kin and less than kind. It's like, what an entrance line. But what I tried to explore was the court, and Claudius's first public appearance is going great. He's got the tone, he's got to build the tone. And then Mr. Poopy Pants comes in upstage, and his first line is so like a grumpy teenager. It is snarky. And once you kind of feel that spin, you just see it throughout the play. Okay, the process. Okay, casting first. For me, I knew that this play was not going to be amplified with microphones. Most of the shows that we do in that room have been are amplified, and we renovated it during the pandemic, and so this was the first show we've done in there unamplified. So I was a little like, you know, what are we going to be up against? And so one thing that I was really looking at in auditions is, do they live inside the language? Do they understand how the language is built like music? And can they make it clear to my ear? But what I mean by that is a lot. You can tell if an actor has done mostly contemporary work and Shakespeare is not the land they live in, because they will try to just make it real, which is like singing "The Hills Are Alive" without understanding the meter, and it doesn't ever quite make sense. So I'm looking for that. And then I'm also looking for like clarity and resonance, which is like really old school, but like I want to know, like in a 625 seat house, you've got a shot at making these words clear for an audience. And then it becomes about who seems to understand the world more. In the process, we do 2 days of table work. The dramaturgs are there. We had a wonderful text coach who leads the drama program at Carnegie Mellon, was with us. And then I do a day of viewpoints work, which is physical improvisation, and it's really about building ensemble and getting the actors to listen to their bodies, to each other's bodies. And then I do a little bit of Meisner technique, which is really about listening, and most people think that's for contemporary work. What I find is the more dense and complex the structure, whether it's Sweeney Todd or Hamlet, the more important it is to make sure that I can be present with the other human being in real time. And so what I find is the combination of the text work at the table and then those very kind of improvisational pieces set us up to have the actors feel like they have a lot of agency in the room. They can try stuff. They can throw stuff against the wall. Does that sound right, Brian?
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I loved it. It was very cool. And the Meisner, which I've worked on individually, like in scene study class, and I've never had a rehearsal process. And there was that thinking early on where I was like, well, how does this relate to more of a classical text? Meisner is usually television or film or more contemporary work, but the heart of it is, no, it's reacting honestly to what's being given to you at any given moment, and you're responding innately, and so it drops you in as an actor. So no matter what, if you're speaking in to be or not to be, that is the question, or you're speaking in a classical form, which isn't necessarily a classical form, it's modern language, you have to be listening to what the other person is giving you. And so I found it very, very helpful. I loved it, and it also kind of, it's like a dating process. The first date's over with your cast. Now you can kind of hang out and you understand each other physically, mentally, and you kind of bond through these exercises that are all about being aware and truthful in the moment and being who you are with each other, which I found really, really cool. And the viewpoints is great because there's a physical world you're exploring, and it's full of exploration that has no desired result, but so many different resonating moments that, I mean, if I told you all the type of images that we came up in that, I was like, oh, you could put all of these in Hamlet, in this production of Hamlet, just from us just kind of doing some of these exercises together. It was fascinating and really, really, I found very informative. So I appreciated it. It was cool. I loved it.
Great. No. Question over here, and then we'll come back in there.
Okay. To Don Rubin, this conference made that performance last night for me. I actually understood where we were and how it happened, and it was just a beautiful experience, the entire performance. My question to the dramaturg, who was the town crier during the time that Hamlet was first performed? Because he makes commentary on other performances. He criticizes the actors and says, I'd rather the town crier speak my words. And I thought, wow, there may be humor in that if you were alive at the time and knew the specific issue of that particular town. So has anybody matched up the records of the town criers with the acting ensembles?
That's really interesting. So as a dramaturg, when I put together a research packet and I give it to the team, and then occasionally these wild questions come out of the middle of nowhere, and you think to yourself, I really am a smart person, but I have no idea the answer to your question. And it happens throughout the process, so I would get them emailed to me. So I had very specific questions about eyewear, eyeglasses at the time. I had questions about a specific weapon for a specific Norwegian captain. Questions how do burial rites, and how do do priests swing the incense burners differently today than they did then? And this is a question that I would have said, give me a day or two and I will get back to you. But I think really what that's about is about the difference between how a good actor, and kind of getting at what Chris was saying, how a good actor has a command of a language versus you might as well give it to the town crier. You would rather have the town crier read his words than a bad actor read his words. And so I think that that's the joke in there. It is possible that there was a specific town crier, but I would have to do the research on that one.
I would think a town crier basically has to be loud.
Yeah.
It's,
Declamatory.
Yeah, just very loud. Question over here.
All right, you two can fight over it.
I don't have a question. I have a comment, which is that you just talked about the Meisner method, and it clicked in my mind because when I watched Hamlet, I really felt like you had cast a spell, that the conversations were real and immediate and authentic. The responses from all of the interplay, one person to another, it was beyond a believable situation. It was more like I was watching a family drama as it unfolded. And so I wanted to tip my hat to all of you for creating something so very real and something that was so immersive.
Thank you so much. Wow.
If there are other questions, raise your hand. I have one quick question for Chris. One of the unusual things that I saw in this production was the size of Polonius. Usually Polonius is big with a beard and obviously old, and this time he was not commanding in a physical sense. Could you talk a little bit about the casting of Polonius?
Well, I was just thinking about you, Don. You don't have to be tall to be commanding. No, it really was. There were probably, it's such a luxury to get to go to New York and audition actors, because you'll have 30 actors come in for each role. They're all wonderful. They could all do it. And then you narrow it. I think we had our top 5 for this role. And to me, what Todd Servers brought to it was the most crystal clarity, and the person who understood the line between ruthlessness and humor. Because I do think oftentimes Polonius is just funny, and to me he is the spy master. He's the Dick Cheney in this world, and so I really wanted both of those to be present.
Question over here.
So I'm new back to Shakespeare after my college experience and many years in medicine since then. And so I was very struck, and I direct this to the dramaturg and perhaps to the psychodramaturg. The interaction between Hamlet and his mother in particular was striking to me. And how did you work that out? How was that worked out?
Actually, this might be a better one for Chris to answer, just as the director, in talking about that relationship, because the actors had questions.
I think for me it starts with his first speech and what I mentioned earlier. You know, when he's alone, to your point earlier, the first thing he wants to share is how much his mother has betrayed him. And so what that says to me is that the relationship between them was deep and intense. His relationship with both of his parents was like really intense. But they don't interact much. They interact a little bit in the first scene. He's snarky to her in the play within the play, and then he finally ends up in her bedroom, and it's all bets are off. You know, I think what's clear in the language is she thinks he might kill him right before he kills Polonius, which is a terrifying thought. And that guided us a lot, because then the next beat is about him saying, how could you have done this? Look how great my dad was, and look how horrible Claudius is. Trying to shake her into experiencing the truth. But she is experiencing that as someone who has just felt like he might kill her, and she just watched him kill somebody else. That is a pretty terrifying position for a parent, or anybody to be in, but a parent to be in. So she is torn between those two. Some people ask, you know, is there an erotic component in the relationship? We did ask that, and I don't know, maybe. I mean, it's mothers and sons, you know, that's maybe. There's certainly an intense amount of jealousy. The main thing in that particular scene that we were interested in was finding all of the shifts of tactic and temperature, because it's very easy for that scene to just be intense. It's very easy for Hamlet just to be intense. And so, like, what are all the other things he's trying to actually achieve in the scene, what we were playing with? Yeah.
I noticed a couple of particular choices that caught my eye. One was the movement of the ghost of Hamlet's father. He seemed to be moving up and down just ever so, which made him seem more apparition-like to me. Also, the choice of Hamlet, Prince Hamlet, wearing this red shirt under the black, and then the black stuff comes off later. Just this pop of color all of a sudden. I'm accustomed to seeing Prince Hamlet in all black all the time. Anyway, would you just talk about those two particular choices?
Well, we knew, one of the things that I had talked to the set designer about was when the ghost appears, he's got to appear in the Vaughns, in the theaters, those downstage entrances, because the other people on stage have to look at him and talk. So he's got to be downstage, so they're facing in the right direction. So how do we make that mysterious? How do we make it feel like a ghost? And so we came up with the idea of these little lifts that just kind of levitate him, for his first entrance. And so in rehearsal, probably because of the viewpoints work, the actor, when we were doing the scene, he just started goofing around with this, like, I'm getting ready to be on the lift. And I'm like, oh, Brick, that's actually really cool. Do you think you could keep doing that? And so he did, and it was like the most low-tech solution ever. But it was he offered something, and I said, I'll watch that. And then the other thing, the red, that was absolutely the costume designer's notion of just like the layers of Hamlet as he reveals, as he's growing himself. What else do we get to experience of him?
One question, in a play where you see so much of the real play performed as it is, what was the thinking behind moving to be or not to be to such a position that you waited forever before, but soft you now, the fair Ophelia?
I was waiting for that question. I was like, who's going to ask that question? It's funny, the very first Shakespeare production that I acted in was A Midsummer Night's Dream when I was a sophomore in college, and we used the Penguin published version of the text. And at 19, I thought, okay, this is the version of the text. And then as you work a little bit more, you realize that there are many, many, many versions of the text. And one thing that revealed itself to me as I was researching this was that in some versions of the text, to be or not to be happens in a different position, and that some directors choose to move it. And I thought, well, how interesting is that? Because as an actor playing it, I had always found in the prior position, it felt there's not a immediate dramatic reason to do that speech. It is a great speech. It's a fascinating speech. But it's like there's not it doesn't help me get from A to B. And so in the earlier position, it's like he's seen the apparition of the ghost. He goes home, his adrenaline drops, and now he has to figure out what he's going to do about it. So for me, it felt like a much more active problem to solve. That was why we tried it there. Yeah.
Hello, thank you so much. How has your signing of the Declaration of Reasonable Doubt affected your work as a director? And then also, does that spill over into your work with your team?
It's I grew up Southern Baptist, and it's a little like my work, my relationship to the Bible, because it's fascinating, it's interesting. It is. I am endlessly interested in it as a history buff and as a reader and thinker. When I work on the text, I have to start with the words on the page and the story that I have. And yes, in the back of my mind, I can think, it makes much more sense to me that Edward de Vere would have had the sophisticated political awareness to write this play than the guy in Stratford. But I don't have anything, I can't prove that, and I can't, other than putting it in a footnote in the program, I can't kind of telegraph it to you. So I don't spend too much time in that when I'm, when I'm working on the play. The other piece of the puzzle for me is like when I think about Edward de Vere writing the incredibly human scenes in an As You Like It or a Twelfth Night, I'm like, I don't know, and so I go back and forth. That's when I talk about the Southern Baptist thing. It's like, what did Jesus mean by that? It's like, it depends on the day, what I think. So it's still in my mind, but it's not present in a vivid way in the rehearsal hall.
Can I just talk? I mean, this question wasn't directed at me, but it's also kind of thinking about if you are looking at some of the English, we've heard in this room already interpretations of who that might have been in England at the time, and pointing out this Earl or that, and thinking about even just the son and mother relationship between Hamlet and Gertrude. There's also in Danish history Danish kings who became English kings, where the history also echoes in similar ways, right? So you can simultaneously, I think, sometimes hold all the possibilities of it, but when you're working on a specific production, what is helpful, and this is where the dramaturgy, what research do I present? If I presented all of it, an actor's like, what am I supposed to do with this? I can't act this, So it's what of it is useful and helpful for the job that you're doing in the room to bring the story to the stage. Yeah.
I think we've just about run out of time. When I first
impossible.
Oh, impossible. When I first approached Chris and Leanne about joining this panel, the question that I think you asked Leanne was, would it be painful? And I think your questions have been wonderful and your answers have been even better. I want to thank all three of you. I hope it wasn't painful. Thanks so much.